Inside and out, everyone you know has got 'em. Your mom and dad and all your friends. Enjoy your scars, scars, scars. Enjoy your scars.
A note before we begin. In the days preceding the release of this episode of Bearing Scars, we learned another former Florida-based politician found himself in the headlines once again. This time, the former big city mayor and his political party's former gubernatorial nominee was arrested. As a former elected official myself, who also was in the headlines for missteps in life, I can truly empathize with this man who was once on a potential national trajectory, only to be derailed by his own doing. The typical response to a politician's downfall is so very often political in nature. Those who agreed with his politics too often hope the misdeeds of one won't affect the standing of others with his same belief. Thus, they shun him. Those who disagreed with his politics too often pounce online and claim the misdeeds of one is a clear reflection on all who share his beliefs. It is naive, I'm sure, but I hope we can understand the problems or addictions of one man or one woman are just that, their individual problem or addiction, even if it impacts those they love. Part of the reason we found Bearing Scars to be such an open and accepted venue for learning how to overcome our own self-inflicted mistakes is that we provide every guest with grace and forgiveness, and we allow them to tell their story without filters. This raw discussion format provides you, the listener, with a real understanding of the person behind the headline or behind the mistake. Some of our guests have been world-famous business leaders, politicians, community organizers, actors, athletes, mobsters, moms. Our premiere episode, His Second Chance, featured Desmond Meade, a man who went from a homeless drug addict to one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world and a Nobel Peace Prize nominee. Our episode titled A Wrestler's Addiction covered the addiction and recovery story of WWE wrestler Matt Morgan. We aired an emotional episode titled Her Deadly Secret, where someone you know is a Chamber of Commerce president reveals for the first time the deadly consequences of her addiction. The Quiet Man introduced us to a former CEO of a garbage company who was molested for years as a child. 40 years after he thought the abuse had ended, his abuser returned. In Finding Her Voice, the actress we all remember as the voice of Sally in the Charlie Brown cartoons reveals her spiral and eventual peace. We met a former mafia enforcer in The Family Business. The New Englander's mafia lifestyle had predictable consequences, including prison, being shot in the back of the head, and an amazing transformation. We went to the heartland of America for a chilling episode titled Soccer Mom, Dealer, to meet an Idaho mother whose own addiction inadvertently caused her to become a drug dealer to, of all people, her own son. If you've seen the Amazon Prime documentary Rom-Con, Who the F is Jason Porter, you already know some of the story of the featured victim. But what our episode of Bearing Scars with Heather Rovette revealed were secrets even her mother didn't know until it aired. In The Uncancelable Man, we learned some techniques to overcome adversity when it seems the whole world is against you. In episodes to come, we'll meet more leaders who've overcome their own self-inflicted scars. We've established a level of trust with our guests and our listeners, and I think you'll find these real-life stories inspiring. Please follow our show to continue listening and rate us on your podcast platform of choice. Today on Bearing Scars, we're continuing our discussion with the man whose scars derailed his life. Just a decade ago, Senator Jeff Clemens was on a political fast track in Florida as one of the highest-ranking Democratic senators in the third largest state in the nation. His work in economic development, social, medical, and community building saw Senator Clemens as a statewide leader on a potential national trajectory. In part one of this discussion, we learned Jeff is a natural communicator, but he is shy and he's a reserved communicator who always naturally let the others shine. He was in a band with a recording contract and CDs, but not up front as the lead singer. He was an award-winning journalist, but as a storyteller for others. He was an advocate for so many in his community, but often let others take the glory. Yet through his shyness, people saw a natural, humble leader, so they elected him to lead. In today's very raw discussion with Jeff Clemens here on Bearing Scars, we discover the scandal that rocked the state, Jeff's family, and unravel the life of a man who had up until then seemingly done everything right. We also learn how he's been since the scandal and how you can learn from his resilience routines. Now, part 2 of a very emotional and honest discussion with Jeff Clemens. Welcome back to Bearing Scars. We have just been through the meteoric rise of a man that, if you're writing a book, you seem to think you know how the story's going to end. But just like in life, there was a roadblock. There was something that Jeff did. He admits it, takes responsibility for it, and this is Bearing Scars. So we're going to talk a little bit about the scar that he has, what caused it, and what he's done since then. Jeff, what stopped your meteoric rise?
My selfishness, to put it mildly. We talked earlier about, how I did enjoy the attention, the adulation. And frankly, my wife and I were not spending nearly enough time together. I was in Tallahassee. She was getting her PhD at the University of Miami. And we drifted a little bit apart, spending less time together than we should have been, and me not focusing on the things I should have been. And I drifted, and I had an affair.
And you and Sheila were fairly newlyweds at the time, right?
We had been married since 2013, so this would have been 2017. Yeah.
And so 4 years into being a state senator,
right?
Things get carried away.
Yeah.
And how did it all happen? And what are you comfortable talking about? And,
sure.
And how? Yeah.
So I had, as you talk about a meteoric rise, I had been elected to lead the Florida Senate Democrats in the 2018 term. As such, you take over running what we call Senate Victory, which is the campaign arm of the Senate Democrats. And so I was gone a lot. I was fundraising. I was doing all kinds of things, and met a woman whose company I enjoyed. We had a lot of things in common. We actually both went to the same college, and we started spending time together. And I did things that I shouldn't have done, and ended up hurting all the people I cared about. It was a very stupid and selfish thing to do on many fronts, and a thing that I hurt my wife, I hurt my kids, I hurt her, again it was selfishness, and so obviously that's a very personal thing, but because I had put myself out there as an elected official. And because I had made myself a target by becoming the future leader of the Senate Democrats and the person who ran their campaign arm, it was a big square bullseye on my back. We won a seat under my direction in part in Miami that we probably shouldn't have won. There was a great Republican candidate down there who was moderate, and we came in and beat him, right? And that took the Florida Senate back to 24-14, right? So in my time in the Senate, we'd gone from 28-12 up to 24-14. We were coming. We were making a difference, and we were not that far away.
You were the quarterback of the team.
Correct.
Because as the person who was going to lead your campaigns for the 2018 election, you're the quarterback of the team. As we all know, the quarterback gets sacked.
Yeah, they came after me. It was very personal. I mean, I take full responsibility for what I did. Again, it was just, I think there's a long lifetime history of myself for always looking for something better, and it took me until recently to realize that I had the better, and I didn't need to be always looking, right? But it was. I put myself out there and made it so that I gave them an opening, but they certainly steamrolled through it. And there were certain people they targeted, and I was number one because, we had just won that race that we shouldn't have won. And so they came after me hard. And, I resigned within 48 hours of the news coming out. And of course today, in retrospect, looking back at it, a decade ago, an affair is not something that kills the career of a politician anymore, right. But it was important to me to do the right thing. A lot of people, don't, and their career is important to them, and mine was certainly important to me. But I remember, some of the things that were the worst, and the worst were obviously, having to tell my wife, but I told my kids individually, all three of them. Mm-hmm. One, unfortunately, I didn't get to tell until he found out about it separately. Oh. And that still, chokes me up till today. It was, I just felt so worthless, to have to tell him, and then to realize he was out with his girlfriend when it came up on his phone, and I wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So it was a terrible time. I had media knocking on my door, and I had kids at home. And of course, what many people don't know is that my wife, I had told her several months before that. Mm-hmm. So we were actually going through therapy and working through the problem and working through the issue. And I was trying to become a better person through therapy at that time that the news came out. So the news wasn't the shock to her. It was the public portion of it. And, what became really clear to me is that they weren't going to stop, and that I've got kids who are in high school. They're old enough to understand what's going on. The headlines, I just didn't want them to go through it any longer. And so I resigned, and I had a lot of people angry at me. I had people angry at me, obviously, for what I did, the selfishness that I acted with, and how I hurt all those people. I had people angry with me that I resigned. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that were very angry. Yes, you screwed up. Can we swear on your podcast?
Yes.
You fucked up. You fucked up, and I fucked up. But you shouldn't have resigned. You should have stayed. You're too important to what we're doing. And so I felt like I let everyone down. Mm-hmm. Everyone that voted for me, everyone in my life that I cared for at the time, and everyone that I didn't know that I was working on policy for to try to make their lives better. We were, from a Democratic perspective, and I don't want to be overly political about it, but we were getting back to being more relevant. It was no longer a super majority. Ron DeSantis hadn't come along yet, and we thought we were on that upward trajectory. And I think maybe some of the Republicans felt that too. And so, I wasn't the only one that they attacked. There were others that they came after, but I still feel that sense of disappointment in myself and loss of what could have been today, 10 years later.
Were there any of the folks from Lake Worth that you had helped with a pothole, or you had helped with some sort of very local issue that was following you? Any of them call you afterwards and say, wow?
Fewer than you would think. I got a few letters. A couple of nice people wrote to me and, hey, we all go through tough times and make mistakes, and you've done good things for good people. But yeah, fewer than you would think. You almost become radioactive to a certain extent when you go through something like this. And, even more so than if you'd actually committed a crime, mm-hmm. right? You make a mistake, or you make mistakes. It's more than a mistake, obviously. I don't want to just minimalize it, but you do something bad. But I did hurt the people closest to me. But what's what's interesting about it is that I never lied in my public service. Mm-hmm. I never lied, in my work. I always tried to be honest with people, even when they didn't like what I was telling them politically. I did that in my personal life, but it destroyed my public life. And yeah, so fewer people than you would think were there. And that's a big part of going through this it's maybe a little different today, a decade later, maybe it's not, but back then you almost became, a castaway, and you were kind of shoved out, and all of a sudden it's just gone. That thing you've worked on for, a decade of your life or 15 years of your life to get there is gone. And as someone who really never I had friend groups, but never really had a best friend, there was nobody there really for me to lean on. And I've never been a person who really leaned on people. I'm big enough to handle all of this myself. Like, I don't need somebody else to help get me through these things. But yeah, when everything you've worked at and what you finally found was your life's purpose is just yanked away, it's weird and it's empty, and obviously it couldn't necessarily rely or lean on my best friend at the time, my wife. Because again, this is months after the affair ended. She's going through a lot, and I've got to be there for her, right? Because she's the one who was, most affected by this. So yeah, I had to set that aside. Whatever my thing was, I had to set aside to make sure that I was doing right for her and the kids. And you don't deal. So we did. We went through therapy, and it was awful and great, and awful and great. And I've tried, obviously, in the decade since to become a better person. But, that time was really difficult. I lost my purpose. I lost my income, which, nobody talks about as much when these things happen. But all of a sudden, nobody wants to hire you for anything. I've got bills to pay. I've got 3 kids getting ready to go to college. How am I going to pay for that? Right. What have I done? Like, what do I do? Like, it's so difficult. And one of the ironies is I spent so much time in the legislature working for people to have second chances. Right. And very few people, I shouldn't say nobody, very few people wanted to work for me to have one. That sets you back.
It's the one thing you said you were great at, and they abandoned you when it was most convenient for them.
Yeah, yes, that's true. Not everybody, but yes, there were a lot of members of my caucus I never heard from again, that I was supposed to lead. Never heard from again. Look, I get it. Like, everybody in politics is trying to cover their backside. So, I understand the wanting to distance themselves a little bit from me, but I wasn't looking for public defense. It would have been nice to get a personal call from a few more people that never called, that I thought I was pretty good friends with and had done things for. So that's the old adage: you kind of learn who your friends are. It's certainly true. In politics, you think you have a lot of friends, and you don't.
Suddenly, your jokes aren't as funny.
I'm always funny to myself, but in my own mind, it doesn't do me much good, right? You could use somebody there to help. You're trying to figure out how to go through it, and I couldn't be. I was the one who fucked up, so I couldn't be. Woe is me. Like, I had to be there for my family and act as if, I was good. And you're not.
The one person who was most impacted by you having an affair is the one person who stuck by you more than anybody else.
Yeah, you're right. What a move that is, right? And didn't have to. We went to therapy, and we talked about this, and one of the good things our therapist said is, there's no prescription. It doesn't have to be a certain way. The thought is, somebody did something they shouldn't have, in this case, an affair, and you've now got to leave them, statistically, and this is not an excuse for behavior, but statistically, some 30% of people admit to having an affair. So it's not rare. It's not a rare thing. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
When you knew this was about to come out, not when just within your family, but when you knew the story was about to come out, I'm sure that there were some political advisors that told you, deny, deny, deny. one thing that you did as soon as this happened was you accepted responsibility and you accepted the punishment. It was a self-inflicted punishment because you did not have to resign. You chose to resign. What was your thought process behind accepting and creating your own punishment?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I guess I didn't think about it that way. I told you earlier, I'd always been honest with my constituents in my public work, right? And I took that very seriously. And, you know, I decided I needed to be honest with everybody. I certainly did have colleagues call me and say, don't resign. You know, that this too shall pass. And they're probably right. Right here we are in 2026. It doesn't seem as big of a deal maybe as it did at the time. I don't know. But I felt like it was going to be something that was going to be held over my head for a long time politically. And what was most important to me at that time is that the people that I had hurt had a chance to heal and get away from it. Mm-hmm. And if I denied and elongated and prevaricated this whole thing, that I was going to be continuing to hurt them. And so I guess that was also at the forefront of my mind.
But you moved forward.
Not immediately. Yeah. It took some time.
How long did the impact of the resignation, beyond just the financial impact, but the emotional, the overall, how long did that impact really hit you and stay with you?
I mean, it still stays with me today. I wake up at night angry at myself, still a decade later, you know, angry at what I screwed up. And when I get that in my mind, it's hard for me to get it out of it. But I was unemployed for a good 5 months. You know, it was tough finding a job. I was lucky to be able to find something. And, you know, at least with the income coming in, you feel like half a person. Mm-hmm. You know, I've got income. I know, okay, I think I'm going to be able to pay for my kids' education now. I can pay my bills. So that helps, right? Having employment. I mean, all of us, I think, feel more useful when we're working. It wasn't a job I particularly was great at or that I, you know, loved, but it was a job and it allowed me to pay the bills. But yeah, I would say, you know, I had that job for 4 years and I would say I'm not sure I completely came out of it at all during that time. I needed to do something that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So it helped once the kids were kind of finishing up college and my wife was ready to make a move to work somewhere else, that it helped, I think, to be able to look forward to doing something different, to try to change those trajectories and get back maybe to doing something that would bring me joy and that I was, if not great at, good at.
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the theme songs that we have on this show is called Chutes and Ladders. And so you felt that you were climbing ladders and then you fell down a chute. When we come back, we're going to talk about the ladder that you're now climbing to try to be a successful man today. We'll be right back. Today's episode of Bearing Scars is sponsored by the Churchill Strategy Group. In today's complex world, your voice needs to be heard, from City Hall to the halls of the White House. Whether you're navigating local regulations, state policy, or federal legislation, Churchill Strategy Group's strategic insight opens doors, builds coalitions, and turns challenges into victories. Visit them online at churchillstrategygroup.com.
Enjoy your scars, scars, scars. Enjoy your scars.
We're back with Bearing Scars, and today we're talking with Jeff Clemens, a man who, for a short period of time, was Donald Trump's state senator.
My claim to fame.
Your claim to fame is that you were the senator representing Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago and in his home.
That's right.
President Trump at the time, too.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah, for a very short time. Yeah. They did redistricting, so those districts changed a little bit. But yeah, I enjoyed representing Palm Beach.
Did President Trump ever call you as a state senator say, hey, can you go ahead and make sure this passes?
No, I don't think he needed much from his state legislator, unfortunately. You know, Palm Beach County is represented by a lot of Democrats. So, yeah.
That's true. He's
yeah.
probably. So, Jeff, you had to rebound. You rebounded with a bridge job that you had for 4 years, and then you decided you needed to wipe your feet, get off, and start something new. What have you started to do recently?
So my wife took a job as a professor at the University of Kentucky. We decided to move and get out of Florida and just kind of change our stars a little bit. And she's really good at what she does. She got an offer from several different places, but we chose to come here. And in the first year where we were here, I spent the first half of it remodeling my house, a very zen type of activity where you'd have nothing to do but do the work and think. But I realized that I think I needed to find something that would find me some joy. And it was going to actually take her help as well, because it probably wasn't going to pay nearly as well as I would have liked it to. I went back out on the road and working for bands on tours. And it was a great experience. Just being out there around music and around people who loved music every day. And I worked as a drum tech. I worked as a tour manager. Just being, playing some really iconic spots, doing Red Rocks, doing shows at Austin City Limits, the YouTube Theater in LA, just some really iconic spots, traveling the country with musicians. So, again, not the most lucrative job in the world, but yeah, certainly something that will heal your soul and make you happy about what it is you do on a daily basis. To be honest, though, it took a hell of a lot of cooperation from my wife being gone all the time. What a challenge when you've had this experience that we had, and went through what we went through. And now I'm going to be gone on the road, with a bunch of rock and roll musicians.
The amount of trust she must have placed in you with that.
It was a tough discussion, but I was able to go, and it really has kind of changed my trajectory. So I spent a lot of time on the road, seeing, almost every state in America. I haven't been to Montana yet. There's time. But it led to the job I have right now that I just started in January, and that'll keep me home more often. I'm going to be running a brand new 4,000-seat outdoor music amphitheater here in Kentucky at the home of Chenault Vineyards outside of Richmond, Kentucky. Brand new facility, so I'm helping to put it together, and we're supposed to start shows in later in 2026.
Running concerts, a large amphitheater, I've seen it, and you're once again, this is something that I don't know if you recognize this or not, but from childhood, through college, through your early career, through being an elected official, to today, you're helping other people to shine, because you're helping these bands to shine, and you're giving people a smile on their face.
I don't know if you've ever had the privilege of standing kind of at side stage or on stage and looking out over a few thousand people just having the time of their lives. It's awesome. It really makes you feel like, yeah, we did something today to make these people happy. I love music. I've always, been a big music guy. I love music my whole life. So, being back in that space is great, and, lucky enough to be in charge of something again, and so, how lucky am I to be in a beautiful state, where I get to do something that I enjoy, going into work every day and get to see some of the world's best musicians play, from side stage. It could have been a lot worse after what I went through. So,
have you found peace?
No, I wish I could say I have. I don't know how that question goes with everybody else who does.
First time I've asked.
Yeah. Who does the podcast. No, I don't know that I ever will. I mean, I have an overactive mind. It was really helpful in the legislature because I was consistently looking at different pathways for getting things done or to stop things that I didn't want to happen from getting done. Kind of the guide everybody goes to, like, how do we kill this bill, or how do we get this bill, to work? So that overactive mind, unfortunately, is a challenge. I will be doing a random activity and all of a sudden get mad at myself, or cry because I think about how I messed everything up. Mm-hmm. And, it's been a decade. I don't think I ever let my wife see those, or when I just out of the blue say, damn it, or something, she asks what, I'll make something up and tell her it's something different. So if she's listening, I guess she knows now, but it's usually me thinking, oh, I can't believe I did that.
Right.
I can't believe I treated people so poorly, and messed up my opportunity to do great things. When people are talking about you running for governor, and I don't think I ever would have, but when you're the second or third highest ranked Democrat in the state of Florida, they talk about those things, and to go from that to just nothing. I don't know that I'll ever completely forgive myself. I'd like to think I could, but yeah, it's hard to find peace. I've certainly found a space where I don't constantly think about it. That took years.
Mm-hmm. What do you think it's going to take?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you I'd do it, and for anybody listening who's been through a tough time, maybe there isn't something that just completely brings you peace, but there are certainly things that bring you joy and temporary peace. It gets you away from your own brain a little bit, enough to think about, I'm in the moment rather than thinking about, previous. Certainly when I do a podcast, I think about, what did I do? What have I done here? I hope if people are listening, they can get something out of it, that even if you're going to beat yourself up for the rest of your life, it doesn't mean you still can't go on and do things that make impact or that bring you personal joy. And so I'll always have regrets about how I treated people. I'll always have thoughts that I should have done something different. And, I live with it on a daily basis. So maybe the answer for some people isn't that it's just bringing you peace. It's those moments of peace are enough.
What percentage of your time now do you spend, when you think about that time, regretting what could have happened, or really highlighting, because you did a lot of very good things in office, highlighting the good things, even in your head and in your memory? How much of that time do you spend thanking yourself or saying to yourself, I did some good here?
Yeah, here's the ego part of it, right? What I really wonder is what other people think. Isn't that terrible? Like, do they think, oh, hey, I liked Jeff, and for the, decade that he did good things, that was cool, and then he's fucked up, right? Mm-hmm. Or do they just remember the last part of it? Right. That burns me a little bit. Again, like it's that exterior validation that I think, I seek, mm-hmm. That I don't get enough of, I know what good things I did. Is that enough for me? It should be, but why isn't it? Why do I want other people to remember some of the good things that I did as well? Why is that important to me? It's a psychological question that maybe I could work through with a therapist. But I think to a certain extent, we all, as human beings, care what other people think about us. And I hope that there are people that remember the good things that we did. And I'd like to say we. But I don't know. I certainly think, personally, I think more about how I fucked up rather than how about the good things. And that's how my brain works. I wish I could change it.
What do you think your former next-door neighbor in Lake Worth, what do you think they think your legacy is?
Well, I don't really remember my next-door neighbor as much, but a little bit over, there's a school board member who's running for county commission, who I know every time I see her thanks me for inspiring her to do the work. She was, when I was the neighborhood association president, she was the vice president. Mm-hmm. And I got involved in Kiwanis, then she got involved in Kiwanis. And I ran for office, then she ran for office. And she's running for county commission and I think going to win here. So, that makes me feel very good. She remembers, and not only remembers, but remembers to bring it up. Like, hey, remember when you helped me out with my campaign and did my materials and helped me get elected? And she's thanked me publicly in front of crowds while I've been in the room before. So that really, makes you feel good.
And there are people who you hired and people who you helped, who may not come to you and say, thank you for hiring me, thank you for helping me, but you had a big impact on their life. So, I beg you not to beat yourself up too much.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I always liked seeing people who worked for me going on and doing greater things. And one of my legislative aides went to law school afterwards, and he's now working in D.C. as a lawyer, and real proud of the work that he does. I like seeing that. I always tell people, like, if you want to stay here forever, who work for me. If you want to stay here forever, great. If you want to go on and do great things, that's great too. Let me help you. I try to continue that here, but I'm getting old. I can't do young people.
You're in your mid-50s now.
I can't do young people things anymore.
It's almost over.
I know it is almost over, right? So I'm trying to help other people. I appreciate that. We'll see how it all plays out in the end, but right now I'm doing all right, and I hope I did some good things, and I'll kick myself a lot, but also try to remember that that I've had the opportunity to do a lot of things that other people haven't in life, to see the world playing and being a part of music tours, to be one of only 40 state senators in one of the most populous states in the country, to go to the White House to meet President Obama for the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, to help people on a daily basis. I have one story that makes me feel good about my service, and that's we had a couple come to us that was fostering a child. The child's birth mother was an addict, and for some reason the courts were ruling that the child needed to be returned to the birth mother. And just because I had that title in front of me, my name, Senator, we were able to call people, work through the system, get a meeting between the birth mother and the adoptive parents, come up with a visitation schedule, and make it so that 3-year-old, was returned eventually to her mother responsibly once she was clean, because the court order was going to have them return that child when she was not clean, when she was still going through addiction. I don't know, I can't remember the name of that 3-year-old anymore. I'm not sure I ever actually knew, with some of the laws that we have regarding privacy, but I'm hoping, and I still believe that 3-year-old, here a decade or 15 years later is out there living a good life because my office helped, structure the return properly to that mother that was going through those problems.
And that was just one day of the week.
Correct. Yeah.
Over years of service.
Yeah. That's kind of how it works, right? You take on one problem and solve it, and you move on to the next.
Jeff, at the end of every episode, we ask folks what their 3 resilience routines are. Clearly for you, one of those routines is going to be playing music.
Yeah.
And these are things that you do that when times are tough, when you're in your head thinking about things that you don't want to be thinking about, music is one of them. What are some of the other things that you do that helps you to kind of relax and get to Jeff?
Yeah, music was huge, right? I was still playing in a couple of bands, and I even continued to do that even throughout, the troubles that I had. I think I had to, it was a release. And frankly, 98% of the audience never knew who I was when I played anyway. I didn't advertise that, I'm a state senator playing music. I just went out and played. I've always been a reader, but when I was in the legislature, I didn't read very much. So I've turned to doing a lot of audiobooks. So I do that a lot. For a while, doing work on the house was a great therapy for me, So it's not so much what you do, it's just finding something where you can utilize your head to get out of that space that you're talking about. So, when you're doing home remodeling house, you're trying to figure out, okay, here's where I'm going to run the electrical wiring, and here's where I need to hook up this. And, it's just those moments where you can forget what it is you're going through and focus on other things. And I think, I'm just one of those people that gets in my head a lot. So when I'm not active, when I'm not doing something, is when those worst times are. Which is why when I'm laying in bed at night is when I tend to have an exclamation. So whatever your thing is, it's about finding something that takes your headspace away from dwelling. It doesn't do you any good to dwell. You're not going to fix the problem of the past. Again, with my overactive head, I'm still going through it to a certain extent at times, but I find more and more that I'm able to get elsewhere just by focusing on whatever the problem of the day. And I do consider myself a problem solver, so I enjoy doing that. The one problem I can't solve is, how I fucked up my legislative career.
Last question. If Sheila's listening to this, and I hope she is, what do you want her to take away from it?
Oh, man. That's she was never really that involved in my legislative career. She had her career and I had mine. So she doesn't, she's not the person that gets overly emotional about stuff. But no, I have nothing but respect and admiration and a whole lot of thanks that she stuck with it. I know a lot of people wouldn't, and I get why people wouldn't. But I also think that, we give up a lot too early in a lot of aspects of our life, and including relationships. And one of the things we found during therapy is just that, we had a lot to not give up for, if that's a way of turning a phrase. You could tell I was a journalist. And so, we've tried to find some of those things. There's still hard times. I hope at the very least that, we've done enough to be able to put it in our past to a large extent, if not permanently, and enjoy the things that we've been able to. We like the same kind of music. We like to travel. She likes hiking, and I go along. So, hopefully we're thankful that we've been able to continue to raise the kids, get them through college, and enjoy doing things that we both like to do.
Stay tuned. My thoughts on our discussion with Jeff are coming up in the segment we call Scar Tissue.
When a person calls 988, they're connected to a crisis counselor.
A caller can expect to talk about coping skills, talk about resources, and ways to move forward beyond the call.
They can call us, they can chat, they can text, and when they come out on the other side, they're feeling better.
Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org.
Enjoy your scars, scars, scars. Enjoy your scars.
One of the hallmarks of this program is how honest our guests are with telling their stories. And like we discussed in the opening of this episode, too often the headlines dominate their narrative. There's a real human story behind our guests. Jeff Clemens is no exception. In the opening, I mentioned the words grace and forgiveness. He has earned both, and he deserves to recognize both have been given to him by others. But I think the world has perhaps provided Jeff with a greater degree of grace and forgiveness than he has given himself. Those who've made mistakes in life need to learn to forgive themselves. It is hard, especially when you see the impact on those whom you love. And while taking the burden can sometimes be seen as a natural trait of good men and women, I hope Jeff realizes his future continues to be bright, and it's not defined by the one dark period of his past. And yet, Jeff lived in a political world, and it's hard sometimes in politics to not be defensive of what others might think of you for providing grace to a man or woman overcoming their darkest days. After my own scandal, it was men like Jeff who let me know that grace was essential. But we'll discuss my story on another episode. For today, if you know Jeff from politics and had earlier run away from his scandal, I encourage you to give him a call and let him know you're cheering for him. You won't gain anything politically, but you'll be letting a good man know that you appreciate him. If you don't have his contact info, it's on our website at bearingscars.com. If you just met Jeff through our discussion here, I'm sure he'd appreciate any kind words of encouragement. You know who else would appreciate kind words of encouragement? Any members of your family or friend group who have done something in their past and aren't sure if you've forgiven them. Overcoming mistakes is hard. Forgiveness is easy. Pick up the phone. Get on your computer. Call, text, or email someone you think deserves grace and forgiveness. Because we're all bearing scars, but we're all still alive, and we're all moving forward.